fully self-sovereign Bitcoin means you hold the keys to your UTXO on the main chain. That's the cut and dry version of it. Once it's shared in a Lightning channel, yes, it's still sovereign, but you are trading off certain aspects. Once it's in an eCashment or once it's in Liquid, you're sovereign, you have the keys, but there is some world in which you could be rugged. It's far less likely than custodial Lightning, but there is a trust trade-off, so it's not the same as, and in order to scale Bitcoin on the base layer, it's going to require better scripting. It's going to require covenants. It's going to require a soft fork. I don't think a hard fork will ever be on the table for any of this stuff.
No.
I mean, personally, I'm never going to run a hard fork, but yeah, I mean, what happens if there's quantum computers that break cryptography tomorrow? This is in our lifetimes. We need to consider that quantum computers may break some of the fundamental cryptography, and so a change to the hashing algorithm or the signature algorithm, can that be done in a soft fork way? If it's a hard fork, then these are really existential questions for Bitcoin.
Hello guys, welcome once again to BitCorner Podcast. So this is the second episode of season 4. Today we're gonna discuss about Blockstream and more focused on layer 2. So I want to welcome to Byron and Pablo. Welcome guys, they are from the Blockstream team.
Hey Juan, great to meet you.
Hey,
thank you.
Nice to be here.
Thank you very much for coming guys. I know that you're working very deeply especially in Liquid. But before diving into it, maybe you can share a bit about your background and how do you get involved in Bitcoin? Maybe Byron, can you start a bit?
Sure, yeah. I, after school, studied to be a software developer. I did computer science at university, worked as a web developer for many years, and then luckily in 2020 started learning the Rust programming language and some C++, and I was working on some blockchain related stuff on GitHub, and luckily got a call from Blockstream's HR department, and jumped through a few hoops and started working there 2 years ago on the Liquid team with Pablo.
That's cool.
Yeah.
What about you, Pablo? How's your background?
For me, I always say that it came into the Bitcoin world through the window, basically. I always worked more on the internet side. I worked for several ISPs. Working on Linux, the whole routing parts, handling all the basically the infra behind the ISPs, which got me closer to working on Linux. I used to then at one point I started maintaining certain things for CentOS for the Raspberry Pi and other ARM devices, which basically led me to get in contact with Blockstream because they needed some help in designing some parts of the OS for a project. And that was basically my introduction to the real world of Bitcoin. Obviously, I knew about it before, but it wasn't a user even. I didn't even know enough to have a conversation, just knew about it. Right. And my first contact was the first day at the company, basically. So yeah, wow. I came from the Linux world and from the networks, not from the cryptography side.
Wow, that's very interesting that you went straight to the Bitcoin real world.
Yeah.
So, Byron, you're from South Africa, right? So, can you share a bit about the context of Bitcoin? What's basically the Bitcoin economy like in South Africa?
Yeah, that's right. I'm in Johannesburg, South Africa, and I've lived here my entire life. So born and raised South Africa, and yeah, it's I don't know how much you know about the checkered past that South Africa has. It's obviously quite a tale. But as far as Bitcoin goes, it's interesting because there's sort of two different worlds, because there's such a huge level of inequality, like most global South countries, right? You have like extremely, or even just normally wealthy people are extremely wealthy compared to the rest of the country. And so what's interesting here is that I think there's less uptake of Bitcoin from the wealthy people. Maybe some people that know about it are storing their purchasing power in Bitcoin. But what's far more interesting is down at the coast in Cape Town, there's a couple of different places where they've started Bitcoin circular economies. And so there's places like Bitcoin Ekasi and Bitcoin Witsand, where they've onboarded a large number of the shops to accept Bitcoin, and they're paying, they're running the surfer kids, which is like a way to keep the township kids out of trouble, and they're teaching them to surf. And if they do all their homework, they do all their chores, they pay them in sats, they pay them in Lightning. And then those people can spend their sats in the township at the stores. And they're even starting to onboard the suppliers of those stores. So they've got a really great circular economy story going on there. As well as in Bitcoin Witsand, there's a similar but different vibe there. And so it's really interesting to see, because the townships are like the favelas in Latin America. People are just scraping by, but now they're managing to earn in Bitcoin and spend their Bitcoin and find a life outside of crime. And, it's really, really amazing what they're doing for the communities down there. So it's kind of a tale of two worlds.
Yeah.
It made me think about Bitcoin Beach in El Salvador, right?
That's what I was about to say. Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, continue, Pablo. Well, actually, no. Yeah. Good.
Yeah, I'm from Argentina. Maybe, drinking mate as always.
Mate.
Yeah, exactly. So in Argentina, at least my perspective it's a bit different. I don't see obviously there's a Bitcoin community, but I don't see it very very big. I see much more use in USDT than the Bitcoin itself, and mostly because I think it's easier to understand and easier to manage, because the store of value in Argentina is mostly in dollars, right? With inflation and everything, the store of value, the easiest store of value is dollars. So basically USDT is like just an extension, a digital extension of that. And it's a way that obviously you're going to lose with inflation in US, but it's a controlled loss, right? So it's basically, it's a lot simpler to make the jump from physical dollars to USDT. The jump to Bitcoin it's a lot more important, and it's more like a leap, right? And it's so I think it's kind of it's growing, but not at the same level. I don't see it as moving as growing as fast as USDT. Unfortunately, most of the USDT that is in Argentina is based on Ethereum or Tron, not in other chains. But yeah, it's more like an evolution of the physical dollar, and that's it. Obviously, there's a lot of people who work remote to other companies and receive their payments in Bitcoin or in maybe other chains, but it's like I don't see it too broadly distributed.
Well, I think that's really interesting, right? Because the dollar is sort of the first step in countries with extremely high inflation. It's a much better store of value. And yes, it does have some inflation, but it's much, much lower than all of the global South countries and most of the other currencies in the world. So, and it doesn't have the volatility of Bitcoin. I'm sure when your life is so affected by inflation, you can't, you're just trying to save that money for like a few days or a week. You're not trying to save it for 4 years or 5 years, which is where Bitcoin comes into play. And I think the Aqua Wallet Jan 3 guys are hitting this. That's why they've got USDT front and center, because they know that's the first step is helping people to save their purchasing power via dollars. And then they see the savings account of Bitcoin and they're like, oh, well, let me learn more about that. Let me see why they're calling that a savings account.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, actually, you just mentioned Aqua Wallet from Gen 3. So actually, this episode, I want to focus on that, guys, because I want the audience to learn, and myself, a bit more about the layer 2s in Bitcoin. So Andrew Howard had been in the podcast, I told you before, and he told me about what were they focused on with Aqua. And another guys from Blockstream have been here, and we have been discussing a lot of details about that. So, but I never have done like a very specific context about all these concepts related to layer 2. So I think it's really important to address that. So I want to ask you if you can explain what are the difference between the layer 1 in Bitcoin and the layer 2s?
There goes your whole hour. So,
well, if you want a very high level, because then I want to ask you about all that involved about liquid, fundamental, lightning, and elements.
Yeah, I can start maybe Byron jump in. So, basically the idea is what kind of compromises or concessions you can do in order to improve your life. Or to improve your usage. That's the idea behind all layer 2s. Lightning, liquid, or whatever. Fed it really doesn't matter which one. It's just making sure that the differences with the layer 1 are things that you're okay with, right? And with Lightning, you have your keys, you have your Lightning node, or you're using it in a custodial mode, which is not ideal, but it makes like, if you're gonna have $100-200 to use like for your everyday life, maybe have it custodial and not having to think about keeping your node secure or whatever. Maybe it makes your life easier. I mean, if you think about that from the purity level that Bitcoiners want, that's not ideal. But the entry point of downloading an easy wallet and having it on your phone, the entry barrier is very low. Anybody can use it, right? If you want to teach someone to run their own Lightning node, they need to have a much higher level of knowledge that makes it impossible for a normal user. So it's part of having your own concessions. With Liquid, for instance, it doesn't use proof of work. It uses a federated network, which you may be okay with it, or you may be not, or may not be, and it's fine. If you're not willing to make any concessions, you stay within the layer 1. That's it. You're fine. You don't need to make any concessions if you're not willing to, right? Liquid in particular, but even as a concept, is a federated network, which allows it to be much more predictable. And it has, for instance, one minute block, there's no chance for reorgs. So once a block has been created on top of the latest, that's final. So it has a two minute finality, which it's good for making sure that all your transactions that you don't have to wait like 100 blocks or 6 blocks or whatever. In 2 minutes, you have your final settlement. Another thing is confidential transactions, right? That if you are, let's say you're moving your Bitcoin to an exchange for a sale, nobody could know about it because you don't know how much you moved. It knows that the address moved, but the asset and the value are hidden. So it's not as permissionless as Bitcoin, It's one of the concessions, but at the same time, you gain other things like 1 minute block, 2 minute finality, and confidential transactions. So, for me, it's part of understanding what each layer 2 can do for you,
Okay.
and how to make sure that you're okay with the differences, right? It's part of understanding. For everyday usage, I don't think I use Liquid, right? I love Lightning, right? Because it's easier. It's good for small payments and everything. For midterm, maybe I use Liquid, and keep in mind that I'm only talking about LBTC here. I'm not still talking about the multi-asset characteristic of Liquid. Even with that, you can use Liquid as a midterm, because you can use it in cold storage with your own blockchain shade or any other wallet that supports it. So you have other variants, and then you can basically make a swap to Bitcoin when you need to, when you have enough. So you could have your 2 separate hardware wallets for different things. The idea behind each layer 2 is understanding what it can do for your everyday usage. And I'm not talking about other layer 2s like Fedis or whatever, because I'm not that familiar with them, right? So it's not like I'm ignoring them because I don't think they should be there. I'm just saying I'm not familiar with them, with their characteristics, so I can talk about them. So it's I think the one of the things I love about Aqua is the way that they managed to simplify all of that in the interface. By basically, you need to make a Lightning payment, yeah, let's use a swap and move on. So you don't have to manage liquidity, you don't have to manage all the complications of the day-to-day life of managing a Lightning node. So it's you can think about it that it's a bit more expensive because you pay your and a few extra sats in each transaction. But if you have to think about the cost of opening a channel, maybe it balances itself out. So it's kind of understanding what's going on and what the type of layer 2 can do for your everyday usage. Byron, did I miss anything?
No, that was great. The only thing I would add is, the reason we need these layers for Bitcoin is because there's a fundamental trade-off between scalability and decentralization on the Bitcoin base layer. And in order to remain decentralized, which is the top focus for Bitcoin, so that the censorship resistant at the base layer, it means that you're going to have some sort of trade-off when you have a second layer Bitcoin. Sometimes that trade-off is some sort of trust trade-off, which is the case with Liquid and Fediment, like eCash mints. They use a federated custody model. So in the case of Liquid, you're sending your Bitcoin to the Liquid Federation, which is a geographically dispersed federation of entities. And this enables you to unlock that same value on the sidechain in order to use it in a faster and more confidential way, like Pablo mentioned. Now, that trade-off is different for Lightning, but, Lightning has a less trusted usage, but your Bitcoin is still locked up in a channel with a channel partner, and your keys for your Lightning state transitions need to be hot. So Pablo mentioned you can have offline keys on Liquid, like in a hardware wallet with the Jade, whereas it's much harder to do that with Lightning because that state of the channel needs to be updated and signed regularly. And so what Pablo was also mentioning there was running your own Lightning node is a much higher task of technical proficiency and redundancy than, whereas Liquid is easier to use in some ways. Obviously, there's trade-offs to using both. And yeah, I'm a big fan of the Fediment and the eCash mints, Cashew and that stuff that's coming online. But those also have trust trade-offs. And if there was anything that was truly trustless that you could do to scale Bitcoin, then they would do that on the base layer. I think covenants will help in that direction. Some sort of soft fork to enable additional scripting and locking scripts. And so, yeah, that's all I wanted to add there.
Yeah. So basically, if you don't work or basically work on the layer one, you had to give some kind of trusted level, right, to any of those layers. It doesn't matter if it's liquid or lightning, because the layer one is the only one that is purely decentralized, right? The other one, as you mentioned, you use a channel, or in the case of liquid, a federation. So let's talk about liquid a little bit more. I have many questions, but there are two right now that it comes to my mind, and one of them is that hold on, I missed it. Who has control of the liquid? I know you mentioned the federation, but who has the control of the liquid and in the direction of which it develops? And my second question that it's related to that is, how does the incentive structures work for liquid in order to maintain it unbreakable or incorruptible? I'm asking because there are people that will think that if we can trust on them, right? And I think that's a very fair question, because especially Bitcoiner will say, don't trust, verify. So for me, it's like, if I need to hold a big amount of Bitcoin, I will never do it on the layer 2 or liquid or lightning. I will do it on the layer 1, and I hold it on my Jade wallet or any other hardware wallet. But if you want to make a small transactions, then you can choose the layer 2. So that's why I want to ask you about that, because again, I think it's a fair question.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so Blockstream is the technical provider for the federation, for the Liquid Federation. So there are two different things. Let's split it in three.
All right.
Liquid Federation, functionary operators, which is basically a subset of the Liquid Federation, and Blockstream as a technical provider. So basically, the Liquid Federation it's a public set of, I don't know, around 70 members. That includes Shan3 for the involvement with Aqua Wallet, and many other companies that are involved with Liquid. So basically, what they decide is who can become a member, who can participate in the discussions, and they basically decide on the future, on the idea of how to move Liquid forward. For instance, the process of discount CT that Byron implemented for Liquid came from the Liquid Federation. So the idea is to make confidential transactions cheaper, almost cheap enough as an explicit transaction, which means that there's not going to be basically a monetary excuse to use explicit transactions. That's something that comes from the Federation. Blockstream, as a technical provider, implements that. That feature is being enabled in Liquid testnet in this week, maybe next, and as soon as the testing goes well in Liquid testnet, it's going to be enabled in Liquid. And the decision for that came from the Liquid Federation.
Okay.
A subset of that. Of those members of the Liquid Federation are the functionary operators, which is the 15 companies that run a functionary. That list is not public for safety reasons, but it's 15 of those 70. If you find 15 of the 70 members or whatever number that you don't trust, you should not use it, and that's it. Right? It's if you don't trust the members of the federation, a subset of those are the ones that run the functioning. So that's where you can draw the line. You look at the federation member list, and also because who runs a functionary keeps moving depending on geographical things, depending on availability, depending on many different concepts. So it's even if you get the list now, it doesn't mean that it's going to be valid tomorrow. So that's basically what happens. And the other thing with regard to trust in the functionary operators is that just because they have a physical functionary that they are running, that doesn't give them any extra power or doesn't give them access to the keys that handle the wallet. The keys are stored inside an HSM. So that means that even if you have physical access to the functionary, that doesn't mean that you automatically have access to the keys. Right?
Okay.
So when people say, no, if 11 members can collude and do whatever, they are assuming that the functionary operators have access to the direct access to the keys, and they don't. So that means that the need for trust is a lot lower. Even more now that we released you open source the code for the functionaries, so people can know exactly what's running on the functionaries. We haven't released the code for the HSM because that's a different part. I don't know if it will ever be. It's a different discussion, but the HSM basically handles the keys and certain validations. But the logic behind Liquid is in the functionary code and in elements, which are both already open source. So, it goes back to what I was saying earlier. If you understand how it works behind the scenes, or you understand the trade-offs, then you could be okay or you could not be okay. It's up to you. But it's, as you were saying, you not store a big amount in Liquid. I'm not sure I agree with that, but I do not store a big amount for a long term. Mm-hmm. But if it's savings, it's going to end up in Bitcoin. So really, you have one big UTXO and you move it to Bitcoin, and that's fine. But for maybe for everyday usage, if you're a company, it could make sense to keep it in Liquid to move it faster or to move it confidentially. So yeah, that's kind of a bit of a background for the Liquid Federation.
I think that's the point, right? Is that Liquid is sort of a middle ground between your super cold on-chain Bitcoin and your very hot Lightning small payments, where you don't even mind fully custodial Lightning. I think we've seen from the usage of Lightning how, the amounts are so small. Most people are willing to just use Wallet of Satoshi or whatever fully custodial Lightning solution there is. I like Blink personally because it's just, you have much more reliable channels. You can offload all of that channel management onto someone that does it professionally. And the amounts are so small that you are willing to lose it all for the convenience of your Lightning payments always working, right? And this brings us back to where once you're off the main chain and onto layers, the custody is a spectrum where Liquid is the most trust minimized custody you could have, and custodial Lightning is the most trusted, right? So if we just sort of think, let's war game it out a bit and to say, okay, what would it take to firstly just stop the Liquid sidechain from running at all? Okay, well, now you need at least 5 of these functionary operators to collude and to stop signing blocks and to stop signing transactions. And the Liquid chain is then no longer moving. This will be very apparent to anyone using it, and especially Blockstream as the technical provider. And the process will begin immediately to swap out those 5 unresponsive functionaries, right? And that's just to stop the chain. That's not enough to steal any funds. To steal the funds, you would need 11 out of the 15 functionary operators to collude perfectly in order. And as Pablo was saying, that's made even more difficult by the fact that, yes, they have access to the server and the hardware security module is right there, but exfiltrating the keys from the hardware security module it's an unknown. It's a complete unknown for even the functionary operators. So that's where they don't have access to those keys. And so if 11 of them could collude perfectly without anyone catching on to them to somehow sign this rogue transaction, then it's possible. But what's more likely? 11 companies whose incentives are actually to keep the Liquid network running because they use it for their operations, they use it for their features and their products, or for your one Lightning custody provider to rug everyone and take all the Bitcoin that's locked up in their channels.
Or even a custodian in the layer one, right? But it's, oh no, I'm going to stay in layer one in a custodial environment. Yeah, no, I'd rather stay in Liquid.
Yeah, I'm on layer one, but it's an exchange, so
Yeah.
I don't actually have my keys anyway. So there's a huge spectrum, is what I'm trying to say, from completely trust minimized federated custody, where Liquid has been doing that without any glitches for 6+ years. No hacks, no funds stolen. There was one hard fork of the Dynafed upgrade, and that was the only issue Liquid has had, where it stopped making blocks for half a day or a day, and then the issue was resolved. But that was just a bug.
Yeah.
And that I think was one of the hardest things the Liquid team has ever had to pull off, was the Dynafed upgrade and then the Watchman upgrade.
Yeah.
But so to bring it back to trust, once you're off the main chain, in order to batch those transactions together, there's some kind of trust trade-off happening somewhere.
I was looking at some statistics yesterday. And basically what we consider an outage for Liquid is 5 minutes without blocks. That for us is an outage. So, which means that we lost 5 rounds consecutively. And last time that something like that happened was June 2022. That we lost in the same day twice 5 blocks in a row due to a problem with one of the connections among the functions. And since then, the backup connection has been online all the time. So there's a lot of effort making sure that the network stays up and running, stays reliable. And when we had issues, as Byron said, with the Dynafed hard fork, there's a few blogs where basically we did the whole postmortem about what happened, why it happened, where was the bug. So it's being very clear and very open about what happened and why. So I think that's something that helps with the trust. Those who don't like Blockstream or don't like Liquid, they are never going to use it, and they are never going to care about making the functional code open source, or they are not going to care about anything, and it's fine because they're not okay with the concessions. And I agree. If you're not okay, then fine. But what we want to make sure is that we are open and clear with regard to what it means to use Liquid, right? Where the trust is and how it works behind the scenes.
Cuando dejas tus activos digitales en un exchange o en custodia de alguien más, te expones a riesgos de terceros no deseados. A diferencia del sistema bancario tradicional, Bitcoin te permite tomar el control total de tus fondos utilizando tus propias claves privadas. Esto te permite ser soberano y esencialmente tu propio banco. Al tomar el control de tus Bitcoin, puedes evitar riesgos innecesarios de terceros. Almacenar tus Bitcoin en custodia de terceros como los exchanges puede exponerte a ataques de actores malintencionados, gobiernos o estafadores que lo único que quieren es apoderarse de tu dinero. El proceso de autocustodia puede parecer abrumador al principio, pero afortunadamente Blockstream Jade Wallet hace que sea súper fácil custodiar tus activos. Las billeteras de hardware son dispositivos que almacenan de forma segura las claves privadas de tus bitcoins y activos de Liquid sin conexión a internet. Las billeteras de hardware aumentan la seguridad de tu billetera porque tus claves privadas se almacenan en un dispositivo especializado que no está siempre conectado al internet. Como te he dicho antes, mantener tus claves almacenadas en un dispositivo en línea puede exponerte a factores adicionales de ataque, por lo que se recomienda usar una billetera de hardware al almacenar grandes cantidades de Bitcoin durante largos periodos de tiempo. Jade es una billetera de hardware no custodial para Bitcoins y Liquid que ofrece opciones de firma simple y firmas múltiples. Yo personalmente lo utilizo para almacenar mis Bitcoins, ya que me siento mucho más seguro manteniendo mis Bitcoins en una billetera fría que en una almacenada, por ejemplo, en mi teléfono. Si estás pensando en adquirir uno para ti, no olvides utilizar el código de descuento de nuestro show, BitCorner Podcast. De esta forma estarás apoyando directamente el show y además obtendrás un 10% de descuento para la compra de tu billetera fría. BitCorner Podcast es posible gracias a la ayuda de nuestros partners, así que hablemos de Adopting Bitcoin. Los próximos 15 y 16 de noviembre se celebrará la cuarta edición de Adopting Bitcoin en El Salvador. 2 días llenos de presentaciones, paneles, networking, además del mejor café del mundo. Usa el código HODLSV para obtener un 10% de descuento y experimenta la economía circular de Bitcoin visitando las mejores playas y montañas y probando las mejores pupusas en San Salvador. So therefore, now that you explained that it's a business case for people to start building things in Liquid now, right? Because I have seen that there's an effort from Aqua and from Blockstream to apply those things, including on Salvador. Especially with the Aqua Wallet, they want to implement it in the global south, right? So at least that was Andrew Howard told me, and also Adolfo Contreras, that there's a big effort there. So, by the way, do you know like any specific case of studies in this regard that you have seen lately?
There's a lot of talk and ideas and willingness. I'm not sure any of them are a reality yet, but I'm hoping to have more info on it soon. But there's a lot of moving pieces in that direction, but I don't think anyone is a full-on reality yet. I don't know if you know anything.
Byron, do you know anything? I was asking because I have seen one in El Salvador, but I think they are developing right now. But there's this company that is called Imberlag. So they're working closely with the government. The idea of Imberlag, there is this company that they built basically hotels in different places. So there is this big project in El Salvador that they want to build an hotel. I think there's a sergeant of Hilton. I don't remember the name, but so inside of the new El Salvador's international airport. So the idea is that anyone can invest on it because they have used Liquid because they want to tokenize the shares of the hotel, right? So people can invest, I think it was the minimum $100. I think it's one token. And I think it's backed by some governance bonds. But again, it's quite new. They are developing right now. So, I'm not sure if this is the very first real case studies in these terms. That's why I was asking you, because I don't know if there is a precedent or. So
the thing about that is it's something that I mentioned earlier that I was leaving out of that part of the conversation, and I think we're going back to it. The liquid nature of being multi-asset natively.
Mm-hmm.
So in Bitcoin, you only have one asset, which is Bitcoin, and that's it. In Liquid, the main asset is LBTC, which is just a liquid representation of BTC. There is no exchange rate. It's 1-to-1. It's always backed. But you can issue your own assets and handle them natively without them being a smart contract or whatever. It's just another asset. And when you do a confidential transaction, both the asset type and the amount are hidden. So what you're describing is basically a generic use case of Liquid being multi-asset, right? You issue your own bond or your own representation of shares or whatever, and you can track them on Liquid just as the native token. Same thing that as we were discussing earlier about using USDT on Liquid. It's the way Aqua uses it. It's basically one extra asset that is being managed on the Liquid chain. So the thing about the hotel that you were describing is more like a representation of the real world in Liquid that basically anybody can do. That you could issue your own assets and transact it with your friends within Liquid, and nobody needs to know about it because it's confidential, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there are other cases like that are already a reality. Some in Mexico with
Adolfo told me about
this. So
it's true.
Mifiel, exactly.
So that's
exactly.
True.
So there are a lot of other cases, or even what happened with blockchain with the blockchain mining node that was issued on Liquid. So the BMN finalized a few weeks ago, and now they are preparing for the BMN too. So the idea is that there's the technical thing about the multi-asset chain, and there's the real world application of that theory, which is for instance Mifiel or USDT or the BMN or the hotel. So the idea is that Liquid can be used for all of those things, and you may not even know about it, right? Because it could be done within a confidential transaction. There are basically two types of assets that are handled on Liquid on the everyday usage. One is the classic asset that you can issue yourself and nobody knows about it, and you can register it to have an icon within the wallets or not, and you can move it around, and it's perfectly fine. There are no restrictions with regard to that asset moving. And then there are more like financial assets that can be issued within the blockchain AMP, the asset management platform, where you can only trade it within known players, known actors, which is fully compliant with KYC and AML, and depending on who the issuer is. So you can basically use those tools to handle a real world scenario within a blockchain, right? And you as the issuer can decide who's going to be able to trade your asset. Obviously, you don't have power to remove that possession or to remove it from the owner. But you can at any point you could say who has it, right? For legal reasons. So they are both handled as native assets within the chain. It's just a matter of the implementation that you do on top of it. I imagine that for the case of the hotel, there could be either way. You could have like big investors that need to be susceptible to AML and KYC, or you can have small retail investors at $100, $200 that could be done without any knowledge or without any KYC. So that's part of how it could be implemented and how it happens it could be used in the real world. I think one of the things that Liquid it's trying to position itself for is to be used like an everyday payment system for small payments, right? In places where Lightning may not be an option or may not be the best option, so yeah, I think.
Okay, that's interesting. Byron, do you want to add something about it?
Yeah, absolutely. To bring it on Pablo's final point there, where the way I see Liquid usage, the way I use it the most really is if you're receiving via Lightning, then eventually your channel is going to be full, whether you're running a node or using something like Phoenix or whatever. And then at that point, in order to get more channel liquidity, you either need to pay an on-chain fee to expand your channel or to open another channel, or what you can do is swap that Lightning to Liquid, and sort of keep it there in a medium term. So now in that way, you're spending from your channel balance to Bolt or to Aqua, who uses Bolts under the hood, to swap into liquid. It's an atomic swap, so it either succeeds or it fails. There's no in-between state. And now you can use liquid as this middle ground for collecting your UTXOs and combining them confidentially and with low fees until you have a large enough stack that you actually are willing to pay a main chain fee. You can wait it out while the fees are high on the main chain before actually moving to your cold storage. Or while you're there, if you then need to swap back into Lightning, it's a tool as a middle ground between your cold storage and your hot Lightning. And then to bring it back to the asset issuance point, like Pablo said, there's really those two major cases. The most prominent of which is your stable coins. So USD Tether, there's a Canadian stablecoin, there's a Euro stablecoin, there's a JPY stablecoin, all on liquid. And for each of those, you're trusting the issuer, right? It's not like liquid Bitcoin. Liquid Bitcoin is held one-to-one by the Liquid Federation. They have the Bitcoin. And when you peg out, you can retrieve that Bitcoin. Mm-hmm. Whereas with something like USDT, you're trusting Tether that you can redeem those tokens for dollars at the end of the day. And those are more permissionless, right? And the other good example we were chatting about there is Mifil, who's the Mexican company or bank who's issuing the promissory notes on liquid. And those are also a bearer asset where apparently this was all done with paper somehow, and you would hand a physical certificate to someone else, and they now had the rights to redeem that promissory note, right, for the Mexican currency, which is slipping my mind now. Pesos?
Yeah.
Is it pesos? Yes.
Yeah, it is.
And so a bearer instrument like that is the perfect use case for a blockchain, right? I have the keys, I have the token, I can send it to you in place of redeeming the debt myself, and you can redeem that debt. And that's still a permissionless asset, right? Whoever has those keys is the bearer of the asset and can redeem the asset. And then what Pablo is talking about is actually real world securities. And now securities are beholden to the laws of the jurisdiction where they are. And so in order for an issuer of a security to allow them to trade, they need to adhere to all those laws in their jurisdiction. And that's where Blockstream AMP can help them, such that those assets are only traded between authorized participants. And whatever their laws are, those participants have had to be registered and do that. So that's the permission type of asset, but that's I would say it's not quite as big as the permissionless case of assets is yet, but it is growing. Like Pablo said, there's the blockstream mining note, and there's also the blockstream ASIC note, the basic note, which is a real world tokenization of actual ASIC machines. And so we'll see how that plays out. But the blockstream mining note 1 was hugely successful, and like Pablo said, mining note 2 will be launching shortly.
Absolutely. I have a question. I want to talk about side swaps, because the last time Adolfo Contreras told me about this and it was completely new to me. But before moving to that, I just have a question. Can you be self-sovereign if you don't have a UTXO?
It's a good question. I know that Peter McCormick of What Bitcoin Did fame has been asking this question to his guests for at least a year, and there's no clear-cut answer, right?
Okay.
I mean, I would say fully self-sovereign Bitcoin means you hold the keys to your UTXO on the main chain. That's the cut and dry version of it. Once it's shared in a Lightning channel, yes, it's still sovereign, but you are trading off certain aspects. Once it's in an eCashment or once it's in liquid, you're sovereign, you have the keys, but there is some world in which you could be rugged. It's far less likely than custodial Lightning, but there is a trust trade-off, so it's not the same as, and in order to scale Bitcoin on the base layer, it's going to require better scripting. It's going to require covenants. It's going to require a soft fork. I don't think a hard fork will ever be on the table for any of this stuff.
No.
I mean, personally, I'm never going to run a hard fork. But yeah, I mean, what happens if there's quantum computers that break cryptography tomorrow? This is in our lifetimes. We need to consider that quantum computers may break some of the fundamental cryptography. And so a change to the hashing algorithm or the signature algorithm, can that be done in a soft fork way? If it's a hard fork, then, these are really existential questions for Bitcoin. So and I feel like a soft fork for covenants. And I like great script restoration from Rusty Russell. I think, a script must be restored to its full glory with covenants and with introspection so that we can make better locking scripts, which means developers of apps and wallets can make better solutions, whether they're vaults or ARC trees and, whatever other layer twos are still to be found. We need the base layer scripting to be as expressive as possible without being Turing complete and, XYZ. But, I think to be self-sovereign, you do have to have keys to your own UTXO on the main chain. And that prices out, when fee rates are high, that prices out the entire global south. And this is the solution that layer twos are solving. They're solving the high fee rate future that we are hopefully guaranteed on Bitcoin, because if there's no high fee rate future, the miners will leave in droves. There won't be a block subsidy left for them to stay. So eventually the main chain will be used the way central banks use settlement now between countries, between sovereign nations. Main chain fees will be out of price for you and I and the global south and all but the richest people. And so what are the best tools we have available? What are the best trust trade-offs we can make to improve self-custody and to make shared custody better amongst the participants, so that self-sovereignty is more than just what it is now?
Absolutely. Because actually that's one of that was at the beginning, I think, one of the things that there was, at least for me, was the excuses that other crypto shitcoins like Ethereum, so that wanted to solve the blockchain trilemma, right? But in the end, we all know that it's this, they work in the same way as the fiat money system works, right? So as you mentioned, these are currently the best options, the trade-off options to solve this Bitcoin trilemma. So yeah, I don't know, Pablo, if you wanted to add something.
I think Byron summarized it in a way that I like, right? It's not your keys, not your coins.
Yeah,
whatever
true.
You want to stay on top of that, sure, but it all goes back to that.
Yeah, and actually you were right, Byron, because I heard that Peter make this question, and I was like, I think the last time that I heard it, he was asking to send some out, so I was like, I think this is a good question to ask to these guys. And actually you brought something that I was discussing with Lisa, Nifty Nine, and she also bring back this question about what will happen when quantum computers can, because it's going to be a deal that we will need to face, right? So, and she told me that there is a book or a thesis of someone, I don't remember the name. I had to figure out that he was currently doing the research about this, how everything will happen then in the future, how you can solve these questions about the quantum computer power, right? So yeah, going back to the side swap. So Adolfo was, before we finished the podcast, he was telling me that, about the side swaps, and he told me that it's a way that allows to exchange liquid Bitcoin for shares or bonds, with others that are not custodian. So I don't know if you can elaborate a bit about that.
SideSwap is a company that runs swaps basically the same way that Bolts does, but with another set of assets. So it's it's one of those businesses that run on top of liquid, that liquid itself doesn't necessarily have to know what's going on, because if the transactions are confidential, then there's nothing for us to do chain analysis on. So it's if I'm not I know SideSwap is one of the members of the Liquid Federation, and it's one of the companies that we were mentioning earlier, that they're interested in Liquid having a future, right? So they develop things on top of Liquid, but at the same time, what we work mostly on is the base layer, making sure that everybody has a platform to work on, and making sure that the platform is alive and reliable, and maybe not knowing what's being traded on top of it, because all we see is confidential transactions. And I think, even though sometimes we curse at confidential transactions because it would be nice to know what's happening, we love it because we don't know what people can use it for things with us.
Right.
Yeah, I think SideSwap is a really great platform. Essentially what they're doing is they are running an order book, right? They're an exchange where people can make bids and asks for whatever liquid tokens they have a pair for on the exchange. So that's one aspect to SideSwap, where you're saying, I'm willing to sell my liquid Bitcoin for this many liquid tether, or whichever assets they have in there. What SideSwap also does that's really great is they make the peg in and peg out process a little bit simpler and easier and faster than running your own liquid node, which is easy enough, but doing your own peg in is a little bit of a dance between I need to wait 100 blocks or 102 blocks until the Bitcoin transaction is mature before I can claim my peg in on liquid. And so what SideSwap does is they have a sort of an intermediary wallet where they have a hot balance, and if you're pegging in or pegging out and it's within what they have in their wallet, it's basically instant. And that can get you into and out of liquid Bitcoin really quickly and easily. Whereas if it's a much bigger amount than their wallet, then you need to do the full peg in balance. And if it's a huge peg out, then I believe they need to go to the Federation and get additional authorization or additional Bitcoin in order to be able to redeem the peg out. So that's a more trusted way, I would say, to do peg-ins and peg-outs from Liquid. And then you also have a provider like Boltz who's doing the atomic swaps between Lightning and Liquid, and they also do between Lightning and main chain Bitcoin. And you can also do between can you do between Bitcoin and Liquid? I'm not sure if they have that option.
I think they enabled it a couple of months ago.
Oh,
so,
cool.
Yeah. I haven't tested it yet, but they did.
And so that if you're doing if you're swapping between Lightning and Liquid, that process really only takes like 1 or 2 minutes, depending on when your Lightning invoice is paid and when the Liquid block confirms, which is once every minute. And so as I say, that's a really convenient way to swap in and out of Lightning that I use regularly just for my day-to-day stuff.
And basically, it's the way Aqua works, right? When you're paying a Lightning invoice or you're receiving a Lightning invoice, what you're basically doing is an atomic swap to Liquid.
Okay.
Right? And it's, for me, it has been even more reliable than running your own Lightning wallet.
Yeah. So in the end, I think it's a good way of doing swaps, because in the end, I think the cost is lower, right? Because I think, I don't know, George is paying the fee of the swap, at least. I don't know if that's how Aqua works or in terms of using it.
Right. You're, instead of paying the fee to open a channel, you're basically paying a fee, a smaller fee every time you make a payment. Right. So it's, maybe you need to do the math, but if it's fine enough, the simplicity maybe it's good enough so you don't care about paying an extra 40 or 50 sats each time you do a transaction, because I don't know, if you open a channel, I don't know what is 2,500 sats or whatever. So depending on how many transactions you're doing, it may be cheaper to actually using that. It's again, it's in a different situation, but it's the same. It's knowing the trade-offs and making sure that you're using it to the best of your needs. For instance, if you have a Lightning wallet that you don't use for, I don't know, 30 or 60 days, whatever, and you're not a regular user, and then they close the channel and you need to fund it again, and maybe that in itself ends up being more expensive and more annoying than paying a few extra sats every time you use your Aqua Wallet. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. It's just knowing the trade-offs.
Okay, perfect. Guys, we're going to start wrapping up because there's almost an hour. So I just have one more question. But before that, so I want to do a new stuff here in the podcast, and is that I want to bring to the next guest a specific question. So for the first time, I'm just going to tell you who is my next guest, and I want you that please make a question that maybe you want to ask for them out of curiosity. So, because my idea is to show them, like, the clip of your question directly so he can answer.
Yeah.
I think it's got a good dynamic,
Perfect. Yeah. Unfortunately, he's got two questions to answer now.
Yeah. Well, that depends on how many guests it's going to be on the podcast.
Yeah.
So,
pay it forward.
Yeah. Exactly.
All right, guys. So, where can people find you? And if I didn't ask anything that you want to add, now is the time.
I think normally I'm usually on the Liquid Telegram channels for support, the Liquid community and the Liquid dev. That's the place that I hang out basically the most. 90% of the time deleting spam, but sometimes answering regular questions. And on Twitter, depending on how I feel about doom scrolling. Well, X. I'm not getting used to the new name. For me, it's still Twitter.
Yeah, start at liquid.net and you'll find all the links to Telegram and the Build on L2 community and the GitHub where we run Elements project. So liquid.net is the easiest place to find all the links you need.
All right. So, guys, thank you for being on the show. It was a pleasure to have you here and to share all this knowledge and concepts of layer 2. So thank you, guys.
Thanks so much, Juan. Yeah, it's a great pleasure.
All right, guys. See you next week. Ciao.
Bye.